Okay, so feel free to go on mute if you want to, or turn your videos on and off, whatever you prefer while I'm doing the talk. And obviously we'll have plenty of time at the end to chat through any questions. I'll try and make sure that we've not left anything ambiguous by the time we finish. So let's get this slideshow going. Okay, is that still on okay for you guys? Okay, so yeah, fairly basic run through of Training Peaks, mainly based at athletes. You know, even if you're not coached at the moment, hopefully this will be a nice little insight and break down some of the barriers for using software like this, because I think there's so many advantages over using many of the social media platforms, which I'll come on to in a second. But for those who don't know me, I'm Phil Ellison. I'm a triathlon coach with Total Tri Training, and I've been a lower limb specialist physio and a physio for about 21 years now. Moving over more to coaching at the moment, and obviously as part of our coaching within TTT, all of our athletes are signed up with Training Peaks, and I know from my own personal use of it, I do prefer all of the athletes to be on a premium account, which costs about $9 per month. But yeah, I'll show you why that's the case as we go into it. It just gives us even more data. But you don't necessarily need the premium account. You can certainly start with a basic account. Okay, so the elephant in the room, the reason why I'm doing this is you know, not for any personal benefit as such, but obviously we rely heavily on the data that athletes generate with all the training that they do. And I think it needs to be done as systematically, as thoroughly, you know, and as in a valid way. So we need to be using a platform that allows us not just to analyze the sessions, because that's really looking at it in retrospect, but we want something that allows us to plan the sessions ahead, and then obviously reflect on them, whether that's with the objective data like heart rate and power and pace, or whether it's in a subjective form like how we felt, and whether we managed the session well, or whether we're not coping very well at the moment with various things that are going on. And Training Peaks is one of the main players in this game where we can do all of these things in one piece of software. And then obviously we're hoping to see progression, and we can look to progress our sessions because we can look backwards at what we've been doing, and we can also plan ahead in the weeks to come. And the other big reason is, I think too often, you know, it happens in all forms of life, but we get so dragged into the social media sides of things with Facebook and Strava as athletes particularly. And I know I've been guilty of you know, following up to 100 different athletes and seeing some of the great sessions that they're putting in, and almost feeling a pressure to try to do them myself or to beat them. But we're getting a very biased view. We don't look at the mediocre sessions of those other athletes. We don't look at the rest days that they take. We just tend to focus on the things that they do, which are really good. And then we seem to feel a bit of a need to try to compete with that, or perhaps a bit of anxiety that other people are doing things that we're not. And we get carried away actually training to try to beat other people. And obviously there's various euphemisms for that, which I won't use, but there's no need to do that. We need to focus on ourselves. And even if you're not coached, again, plan for yourself what is best for you, and focus solely on yourself, and let other people just get on with what they're doing. And that would be my main reason for using a platform like Training Peaks. I know when I signed up for it 3 or 4 years ago, it really took my focus away from Strava. And I still put things on there, and I still have a look at what my friends are doing, but I've cut down. I maybe only have 30 or 40 people that I follow, and they're just because I'm quite interested in what they do. But my analysis and my session planning is all on Training Peaks, and that's where I focus on getting the most of my training, out of me. So if you haven't signed up, it's as simple as, Googling Training Peaks or putting it in the web browser. You'll be brought with this page where you can see you can sign up for free, or you can get a premium account. Now, when you sign up for free, you get 2 weeks of premium to try out anyway. So that's the first thing to do, is just sign up, free account. And it's as simple as with this screen, just fill in your details and input all your basic username, password, and some of your demographics to get going. From there on in, there are plenty of metrics and parts of the platform that you can use with the basic version. On the left hand side here of the slide, obviously it's showing you what you get with the basic, and then on the right hand side, these are just the features that you get with a premium account. Now, as I said before, some of those, like the top one, the tracking of peak performances, and looking at a whole year's worth of data and using the training libraries and things. That there's a lot there that as a coach you would really want the athletes to have access to, and that's why we recommend that everybody has a premium account when they're undergoing coaching. But as an athlete, some of that's not necessarily necessary. And some of the advanced metrics, which it says in the middle on the right there, they are useful, particularly if you know what you're talking about. And if you are from a bit more of a scientific or a geeky background, you certainly might want to get the premium account so you can do a good deep dive into all the data. But even at the basic level, you can get plenty as you're starting out. So don't feel any pressure to upgrade the account, and that can be done at any stage, really. So once you've signed up, this is obviously a screenshot from one of my weeks of training. This is what you'll come across, and it's a basic calendar view showing what you've done. This is at the end of the week, so we've got all the various colours. We've got the sessions which have been done and not been done. We've got on the right hand side a summary of the whole week by duration and distance, and looking at the stress score, which I'll go into a bit later. And on the left hand side you've got the library, so you've got your athlete library. If you're a coach, you have more than one athlete there. And you have the workout library where you can draw and drag some of your sessions across if you want to do it that way to plan your week. And then if you signed up for a training plan, or you paid for a training plan externally, whether that be Training Peaks themselves or another coaching company, you can your training plans will go into that box, and you can then apply them to your name, and you will have then a 12-week plan for Ironman or 70.3 or mountain biking or whatever you choose to download. So again, if you pay for plans, they can appear on Training Peaks in that box as well. So that's a basic view of what you will get. Now, if I just take you across, hopefully you can see this now. So this is a dummy account that I've just set up for tonight. So you can see this is the home screen. At the top middle, the word home is in blue with a little underline to show us that we're on the home screen. And you can see that I only signed up for this 2 days ago. So it's giving us the 14 days of premium access, of which I've still got 12 of that. If we ignore that then and just move down, you can see in the middle portion here, we've got today. We've got a note in, hello, welcome to Basic Training Peaks for Athletes. We've got a session that to be honest, I did a bit of BS and I didn't even do the session. So I've just filled this in vaguely. And that was today's exercise session for this dummy account. And then as we scroll down, we can see here we've got power and we've got heart rate. And that's some of the data that we'll look at how to fill that in and get that popping up. Can everybody see that okay? Somebody just give me a nod that they can see that.
No, I don't think so, mate.
Is that not coming?
You've still got your page.
Okay, give us a second. So you're still seeing that?
Yep.
There's Zwift Richmond on the top left?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I'm just going to close it down and see if we can swap across.
Can now see a file that's got TP metrics.
Yeah, I'm trying to get rid of that.
Our effort.
Right, if I close that down. No, that's not showing, is it? One second. Try again. So, how about now?
Yep, it's good.
Okay, so sorry, this is the dummy account that I've set up just for tonight's presentation. We can see here in the blue, we're on the home screen. And then as you look down, we've got 12 days of premium access left because we've only just set the account up as a basic one, but we get the 14 days of free premium. In the center here on the home screen, you get what you're doing today, basically what's happening for today. So you've got a note that says hello. And can we just go on mute, please? Thank you. That's lovely. So we've got the hello, welcome to Training Peaks as a little note there. And we've got today's session, which, as I say, is a dummy session. I haven't even done it. So that's today in the middle. And then further down, we've got some of the metrics that might be important for today's session. So we've got the power settings here. We've got the heart rate, and they would be applied to this session here if we needed to use that. So that's quite a good little section to look at on a daily basis. And then we can see at the bottom, we start to see tomorrow's session as well. On the right-hand side, some of the data that I'll mention a little bit later, but we've got some metrics related to fatigue and tiredness, fitness, and how fresh you are, what your form is like at the moment. So I'll go through those a little later. They're specific to Training Peaks, so if you've not used it before, they'll be quite new to you. Again, another section here on peak performances. We've got nothing in that because obviously it's a new account, and that again is for the premium version only. Over on the left-hand side, you can add events or goals on this screen. So we could click add event. We could perhaps be running a Santa Dash on the 23rd, and it's road running. It's a 5K, and the aim is to beat Santa. So you save that. That then goes into your dashboard, well, into your calendar. We can close that down, and when we go into the calendar in a second, we should see that that's now available there. We can see now on the left it says we've got a countdown, so we've got 8 days until the Santa Dash. So that's the basic home screen for you there. Now that is very useful just as a snapshot of what you're doing. I spend most of my time on the calendar view, to be honest, particularly as an athlete. As a coach, it's a little bit different. As an athlete, I tend to click on the middle there at the top and go onto the calendar screen, which was the typical one that I showed you before. Now, before we go into the calendar in any great detail, if you look at where your name is on the top banner, which is your profile, you can put a little photo in there. If you click on your name, you have your settings. And this is the bit that we need to get right really before we do anything else, because the quality of the data that we get out at the other side of this is, wholly reliant on the quality of the data that we're putting into it in the first place. So the first bit that we can put in is your name, your date of birth, your email address, your address. As much of that I've not put any in, and you don't have to, but you can populate all of these. You can put your date of birth in. Here we've got the subscription and the payments, which come into that box. It's default to imperial measurements. If you don't like miles an hour, and I don't, we can click across to metric. Now, what's really good is, as a coach, I can have all mine set to metric, and all of my athletes, if they prefer, can work in miles an hour, and it will present it to the person in the format that they want to. Obviously, it doesn't change my text. So if I run this at 4 minutes per kilometre, it won't change that if it's within the text of the session that I've asked somebody to do. But as far as the analysis is concerned, it will give you your analysis and your recommended zones and things in the preference, in the units of preference that you want. So I'm going to switch that to metric for now, because I much prefer kilometers now. You can link your coaches here. So if you do sign up for coaching, this is the bit where we need to get you aligned with the coach's Training Peaks account. Further down, you can have daily emails if you want them. So if you plan your week ahead and you'd like an email in the morning to say, this is your session for today. And obviously some coached athletes get this, but you can switch it off. I've switched mine off because it can be a right nightmare. But if you do like to be prompted, you can use this section to make sure you get a message in the morning to say, today's swim session is here, and then it might prompt you to go and get it done. And then we're moving further down. We've got apps and devices. So again, this bit is crucial. So Training Peaks will sync with your other applications and devices. So most people use a Garmin watch or a Garmin head unit on the bike, or a Wahoo, head unit on the bike. And then for trainer sessions, they might still use those, or they might use a Zwift account, etc. So these applications need to be synced with Training Peaks, and it will then just push the data across at the end of your session. So for most people, you'll already have it set up for Strava, so your runs and your rides and your swims go directly from your Garmin Connect account or directly from your Zwift account over to Strava. And just in the same way, they will come to Training Peaks. So if you want to do that, you click on, say, I'll see if I can do it, add new connection. and hopefully, yeah, so you come to this screen. So it syncs with a lot of different partners. As you say, you've got Polar, Garmin, Wahoo, Apple Watch, Fitbit, and then some of the other cycling platforms. Some people may be on Ruvi. Trainer Road is on there, which is another fairly popular one. You've got the native apps like the Tax app if you get a Tax Turbo Trainer. And then obviously probably the most famous and most popular is Zwift. And even further down, there's other things that it will sync with. But that should cover most people for most of the data that they're collecting. So once you've synced to Garmin Connect and say Zwift, then you're ready to go. So that data will then start automatically transferring. And what's really good is that it will go in both directions. So when we're looking at the training programs in a moment, not only will it send the data from Garmin or Zwift over to your Training Peaks to say, here's what you've done if you want to have a look at it, but it will also go ahead of schedule from Training Peaks over to your Garmin watch and give you the workout. It will go to your Garmin head unit if you want to run the workout from your Garmin head unit, and it will go to Zwift or Trainer Road if you want to do it on that platform. Now with Zwift, and I might mention this again later, it's only visible as a workout on the day that you're supposed to do the workout. So if you check it ahead of time, it won't come up. If you think, oh, I've got a Zwift ride to do tomorrow, a VO2 max efforts, I'll just check what it looks like and see if it's there. It won't be there until the clock turns midnight, and then it will appear. So don't panic if you're looking ahead of schedule. You need to do it on the day that it's on. If you move that workout, it will move, but it will only appear on the one day that it's supposed to be there. Then you've got the notifications section. Again, if you want to be notified every way under the sun of everything that's going on Training Peaks with regards to your metrics, if you hit new power bests or heart rate highest, it will do that. But again, it gets a bit too much for me as a coach, but you can leave that on if it's only your data that you're worried about. So that's taken us through this account settings here down to the export data bit. The bit that we want to be a bit more focused on is the next one down, which is zones. And these are your typical training zones. The next three sections, nutrition, equipment, and layout, I'm not going to go into because most athletes don't use those, I have to say. So if we look at just the default heart rate here, there's a couple of different ways of setting your zones which appear underneath. We can do it through having a threshold heart rate, which would be through a threshold test, or through a maximum heart rate, which would probably be through a slightly different test where we try to get your heart to beat at its maximum. And then there are some of these methods here which also use your resting heart rate, but I don't use them particularly, but there's a way of calculating heart rate zones called heart rate reserve. And basically that uses the difference between this figure, the resting, and this figure, the maximum. So here the difference would be 125, and your zones would be calculated on that 125 number. Obviously, the simple zones that companies like Polar, Timex tend to use is this highest heart rate number, and they will set your zones based on that. And then in the science, it's seen as probably the most accurate way of measuring it is to set yourself a threshold heart rate number and to use that to set your zones below. So I won't go into the testing procedures today on this, but if you've done the appropriate test and your heart rate threshold comes out at 165, you would click here, choose lactate threshold, because that's the type of heart rate we want to use. We would choose method, and then depending on where we're doing running or cycling, these two here, the Joe Friel ones, are the most commonly used for running and cycling. So we choose one of those, we choose calculate, and you can see it's gone grey, and we can now look through that and then apply it if we want to. If we apply it, we've got zones 1 to 4, and then the last three are fives in this model, which always makes things a little bit more difficult. But what we've got here is 0 to 139. Then we've got 7-beat window here. Again, we've got another 7-beat window here. And they're very narrow. They're quite narrow bands as we move up. But that's a typical one that we use for running. If you use the maximum heart rate, you click on that there, this middle box will change. And the one that I've used in the past is the Timex one. And that gives us a bit more of a simplistic way of looking at it. It's 5 zones, and each zone is a 10% bracket. So zone 5 is 90 to 100% of your maximum. So you see the maximum here is 185, which is what we put up here. 80 to 90% would be here, 70 to 80 in zone 3, 60 to 70 zone 2, and 50 to 60 in zone 1. So there are different ways of using that. Now, the default would be if you were applying one heart rate to one sport or one heart rate to 3 different sports. But as we know, your heart rates are different when you do a bike test to when you do a run test, and equally when you do your training. Zone 2 heart rate on a bike will not be the same as zone 2 heart rate on a run. So going in a little further, instead of using the default one, if you scroll down a little further, you can see you can actually add an activity, and therefore we can put in specific heart rates. So let's choose bike, add that one. Let's say we'll go off maximum, and we'll go off threshold. We'll go for 160. And then the other 2 values don't really matter in this case. We'll choose lactate threshold. We'll choose Joe Friel for cycling and calculate and apply. So you're probably aware of the training zones generally. In heart rate here for the bike, if I was wanting to do a recovery ride, so cause no stress, maybe help the body to recover and not really getting any fitness from it, I would need to keep my heart rate under 128. If I wanted to gain some endurance, aerobic endurance benefit from the session, which is your typical, long, slow weekend rides, etc., we would want to be in that sort of bracket. Zone 3 is generally called tempo. And zone 4 really it is getting to threshold. So I often take out the word sub and leave it as threshold, because we're getting up to where your heart is working really, really hard. And then the reason that the 5s are all called 5s is because they're all above threshold. So everything below is below your threshold heart rate. And that's why they've got different numbers, because there's different things happening within your body at those zones, specifically speaking, but we won't go into that. Once you get to a 5 and you're above threshold, it becomes anaerobic in nature. And we're starting to use a lot of different energy. We're using a different energy system. And so that he's changed the terminology there to reflect that, instead of calling them 5, 6, and 7. But to my mind, it does make it a bit more difficult to understand. So whether you understand the actual zones or not, at least you'll have a way now to input your data, go for threshold or go for maximum, choose the appropriate here, whether it's threshold or maximum, choose the appropriate in the middle. I say I tend to go for the Joe Friel ones or the Timex one if I'm using max heart rate. Calculate, and then away you go. And then you would do the same for run. You could do the same for swim if you're actually interested in the swim and you think that your watch or your heart rate belt is getting decent data. Obviously, the problem with the swim is you can't watch it in real time. You tend to just be looking at it after the fact. And then we come to power. Exactly the same for power. We go off threshold power. So let's say we've got a nice, round number here of 250. So this is your power that you can hold for a sort of reasonably long length of time. Originally said to be an hour, but doesn't necessarily have to be an hour. Again, I won't go into that on this talk. You select threshold power, which is your only selection here. Choose the method again. And the one that we all talk about if we talk about this is Andy Coggan's zones, which are the 6 zones that are already populated here. So what I tend to do for my athletes then is give them a name. So zone 1 is easy or recovery. Zone 2 is your endurance. Zone 3 is aerobic or tempo. Zone 4 becomes threshold. And then we've got VO2 max. So they're the ones that you'll have seen much more often. And they're the power zones. Okay, so we've got them set up, and then we apply that, and that's done. Same for swimming. We would go for the pace probably here. So if you go down, you could select activity, swim, and go for it there. Same thing with pace. And the pace here on the run, as you can see, we've got a threshold pace. So this is sort of like a 10K pace of 640. This is minutes per mile. We can change it to miles an hour if we prefer. Minutes a mile there. And then we could go to threshold speed, Joe Friel for running. And then we've got zones for running as well. So now we've got the pace zones, which we'll obviously talk about, and you'd have workouts based on those zones. And once you apply that, that's ready to go. So that's probably the bit that you need to test appropriately. Get those metrics set in properly. It will help you understand your body and what's going on, and then it will give you good data on the other side. So we save and close that, and we're back on the calendar. So that then gives us the ability then to actually analyze the sessions based on that data that we've already given to the platform. So if we look here, we've got the weekly schedule. You can see all the different sessions. The swims have a little swim wave icon. The notes has got a little pages icon. You've got a bike, you've got a run. The ones that we've done, if we do them well and we do them very close to what the prescription was, they're green. If we do them so-so, it's like an amber. And if we don't do them at all well, or we don't do them at all, they're red. So as you can see, we can put weights sessions in here. We can have the swim, bike, run. We can have all sorts of different bits and bobs going in there. It's quite easy to move them about if you want to move them. So if you are doing your own planning and coaching, maybe this run session on the Wednesday we can't do, but we could do it on the Friday when we've got a day off. You can just literally click it, drag it, move it over, and we might then need to have the day off on the Wednesday. So really easy to do. If we want to look at adding a session, we can click this plus icon here. So click on the plus, and it brings up a window of what we can choose from. So we've got all these different workouts to choose from, and we could simply import a swim workout and take it from there. So that's that. If we want to move things around a little bit, obviously we need to keep an eye on what's happening for the rest of the week. It's important that we don't try to cram things in for the sake of it. What it's worth doing is looking, as you look here, you've got the basic analysis of the session that you can see as a quick overview. So we can see it was a 70-minute prescribed swim here. An hour was done, 3,000 meters was swam, and the training stress score, which is a Training Peaks metric, came out as 70. And that might be enough. That might give us all we need. We can also see that, well, again, this is me just filling it in, but the athlete thought that it was a 7 out of 10 difficulty, and there's a comment been left. So that gives us a little bit of an overview. Here on the bike ride, obviously it wasn't done so well because it was a 2.5 hour, and I put in that we did 90 minutes. That gave us 60 TSS. Obviously, because I didn't finish it, I must have been quite unhappy. And again, I've left a comment. So if we then click into them, we can see the details. So here was the description of what the session should include. Here's the metrics of what was actually done versus what was planned. So the left-hand side is the plan of the session. The right-hand side is what was achieved once your data uploads from your watch, let's say. Smiley face. So basically, even if you do it for yourself, you're probably encouraged to leave a little emoji to say how you felt that session went. So it's not really whether you thought it was a difficult session. That comes below, really. It's more about whether it was as expected and whether you're feeling as you expect to feel. So if you feel shattered and you're not sleeping, or you're struggling with work commitments, or you've had a row with the partner, you might feel pretty weak or pretty unhappy. So you'd probably be ticking those sort of faces. If you're feeling great and you're tapered and fresh and you came in and you smashed the session and it felt great, you would be up at the strong end. The other comment that you can leave as well is the perceived exertion. So obviously just simply out of 10, 10 being all in, that's everything you've got, which you might feel on a short anaerobic session, or you might feel on a VO2 max session, going down through to something like an 8, which might be a threshold session. Your typical endurance rides will probably be 5 to 6 for the majority and might get up to 7 maybe towards the end. And your recovery and easy stuff will be right down at the bottom. So that's what we'd expect to see anyway. And then there's a comment here. So obviously I didn't really do it. I just filled it in manually. So that's where, as a coach, that's where we look. But equally, if you want to look back over time and follow trends in how you're feeling and how you're performing, this is a reasonable way for you to do that for yourself as well. Okay, I'll discard that. So what about if you want to add a workout yourself? So what you could do, let's say we don't want a day off here. We could delete that. And then we could look to the workout library. So on this left-hand side, when you get the basic account, you see you've got all of Joe Friel's training sessions. There's a 728 sessions. I have to say I've never really used them. But you can look through that library. In the middle here, you can filter. So if you wanted to just look for a swim workout, tick the swim box. If you want to look for a bike workout, tick the bike box, etc. So you can filter through all 700 of them. You might want to choose an easy ride. So you literally highlight it, drag it over. Oops, he says, drag it over and drop it in. and that's there ready for you to follow on Wednesday. So that's the simple way if you have your workouts over here. Now, if you want to build your own workouts, you can go to New, Workout, and then you could title it. So if we wanted to do a VO2 max workout for the bike, we would give it a title, and you probably want more description than that. It's a bike workout, and then you can build it here. So you could build it very simply and put a description in and say, I'm going to do 3 times 5 minutes, or I'm going to do 6 times 3 minutes, or whatever your typical VO2 session is. And you could say it's at 120% of FTP, which would be a common sort of lower end of VO2 max, upper end of VO2 max session. And then you would just work that out what it is once you get on the bike. But we can go even further than that again. And what we can do is go into Workout Builder. So this is a nice way to build your own workouts if you want to upload them directly to your Garmin head unit or to your Zwift account so that it's ready to go. So, for instance, if we wanted to do a VO2 max, we've got these different boxes in the middle. We can choose this box on the left, which is a warm-up. And then we could choose some intervals, which would be this one here. Oops. It says it's going a bit slow, so it's all over the place. Let's give it a second. No. Yeah, there we go. So we got some intervals, and then at the end we could have a cool down, and we'll drag that in there to cool down. So there's a basic interval set. We can then, on this right-hand side, we can go into tinker with the intervals. So if we wanted the hard bit to be 5 minutes, and we only want to do 3 of them for this 3 lots of 5 minutes for VO2, we could change that. Then we could change the prescribed power to what we want to work out, and the rest intervals the same. So we can change the rest. And as you can see, the blue graph changes, and the time up here on the top left for the workout changes as well. Now, once we've saved that, once we're happy with that, and we save it, that will then be in your workout library over here on the left. And then you could simply find it. So it'll be in recent at the moment. Well, my library, there we go. So we've only got one at the moment. It's the VO2 max, and we can just drag it and we put it in where we want. Okay, so that's the calendar, and sort of using the workout builder, using the calendar, looking at your metrics. I'm going to go into it in a little bit more detail in a minute as to how to actually look at the metrics of the workout. But this session is going to stop in a second, so I'll have to restart it and get you all back in, I think. Just give me a second.